Guys, this is just insane. Christine Lagarde is now talking about the new agenda of the ECB. Price stability is no longer the sole focus. Now it's about pushing through an investment and savings union, pushing through the digital euro, and implementing fundamental changes here. In her new speech, she also talks about cryptocurrencies and the role they play here. And the whole thing is extremely dangerous, and we absolutely need to look at what's happening here. Interest rates would also be lowered, but that's irrelevant for now, because the changes that are coming our way are a complete game changer and will absolutely alter the ECB's future approach. More control, more surveillance, digital euros, CBDCs, and much more are coming our way. And the ECB is now speaking for the first time about its new agenda. But folks, don't just believe it. Listen to what Christine Lagarde has to say.
I think we've taken the view that this is a moment for Europe to not only be solid on its monetary policy and not just for us to deliver on price stability.
Moment for Europe where it's no longer just about making sound price policies and focusing on price stability,
but for the Europeans altogether and the European institutions to actually focus on what opportunities there are, what changes need to take place, and at which accelerated pace this should happen.
But it's about checking what possibilities exist here, seeing what changes need to be pushed through, and then checking at what speed to implement them. Folks, this is absolutely hardcore what's happening here. Here, the mandate of the ECB is simply being changed. It used to be just about price stability, and now they're increasingly getting involved in other things. We're also taking a very close look at what they're getting involved in here. The ECB has repeatedly published posts, yes, now it's suddenly about the climate and so on. That's none of your business. Here, in the climate, they are always getting involved in some other things. Here, the ECB makes a post, so this is not from me or anything, but actually a post from the ECB where they shared exactly the clip I just showed you. And here it says, we expect 3 structural efforts from Europe, says President Lagarde. Here, number 1 is the competitiveness compass. Number 2 is the savings and investment union. And number 3 is the digital euro. And all 3 points listed here mean more coercion, more control, more surveillance, less freedom for you. This is an Orwellian agenda that is being prepared here. And we've already heard this from Ursula von der Leyen, who says she intends to convert private savings into investments. And this is the core of the planned savings and investment union. And Christine Lagarde is also talking about this now. But it goes even further. The ECB warns about market power and 3 US providers. There are now posts on the internet suggesting that Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal are to be banned. This is probably exaggerated. They definitely want to push through fundamental changes in the European approach. And as I said, this will not be to your advantage. Instead, it will mean even more surveillance and control for you. But we need to look at all of this step by step, because we actually have 4 deceptive packages being foisted upon us. So, first there's the competitiveness compass, then the savings and investment union and the digital euro. And then there's the ban or restriction on Visa, MasterCard, and so on. I think we'll almost start from the end here. So if we take a look, there was an article in the Handelsblatt. And as already mentioned here, the ECB were power players here in the USA, and that they could exploit their market power. And it also says here, Trump's tariff war reveals dangers, but Europe can respond. And at first, this sounds very exemplary. Christine Lagarde is looking after us, the convicted criminal, who is looking after us and ensuring that we are independent here. And that is also generally a desirable goal, to be independent here, to have our own infrastructure and so on. But if this independence later means that a digital euro is foisted upon us and we become even more dependent, but now not on various providers abroad. We are dependent, but on a single provider here in Europe or the EU or the ECB. We are dependent specifically on the digital euro, then that brings us relatively little as citizens here. There is actually a statement about this, or not a letter, but a statement from Christine Lagarde, where she says we need to reduce this vulnerability and ensure that European offering. For all cases, said the head of the Euro Central Bank, it is really important for all of us that digital payments remain under our control. But that's an absolute red herring. One could also bet on Bitcoin here, one could rely on decentralized technology. Then one would have absolute independence. But this is not about independence. The digital euro, as I've often explained to you, is a tool for control and steering. A social credit system could even be introduced here in the worst-case scenario. You then have an account with the central bank, and if there are no other options available, if other banks or so no longer participate and there is no free competition, that would be the worst case, but it might also be possible in the future, then it can be easily programmed here. Okay, you've eaten too much meat, you can't spend your money here anymore. And the interesting thing is, there was an article in the Wirtschaftswoche, and it talks exactly about what advantages the digital euro should offer and what risks it entails. If you go through the article, the digital euro is supposed to be introduced as a supplement to cash. So initially as a supplement, but later it might also lead to the complete abolition of cash, because that is actually also part of this agenda. And if you ask me, although the article lists a few advantages like payment independence and so on, if you ask me, these are not advantages for the user, but rather all of this here. Advantages for those in power. The article also states, very, very importantly here, however this feature also carries significant risks. A centrally programmable currency theoretically allows for very extensive control over the flow of money and the consumption behavior of citizens. In such a scenario, funds could be subject to restrictions, as I just mentioned. For example, they might only be usable for certain goods or services or expire after a certain period. People could also be excluded from this monetary system if in doubt. And it doesn't have to come to the worst-case scenario. It might also be that things go quite well here at first. But it could happen that later on, someone else becomes the president here at the ECB. Or something like that, or someone then exploits this power tool. And we've often seen that eventually power corrupts. Corruption occurs. And you always have to ask yourselves, why is something like this being done? I also saw a report by Joanna Coten on YouTube about this earlier. She made a video about the potential ban here of Visa, MasterCard, and so on. Not about the new speech by Christine Lagarde, but about the ban. And she also said, hey, you really have to ask yourselves, why is this being done? Why are they changing this now? Everything? Why is this suddenly being abolished here? Why are they suddenly saying, this is really, really bad, PayPal, even though people actually find it quite good? That means people are even using it voluntarily, it must be said. There are all these digital options, and yet the digital euro is now being pushed. It's simply about potentially expanding power here. And that's why there's also the problem here with Bitcoin. You mustn't confuse that. The digital euro and Bitcoin have nothing to do with each other. They are opponents. Almost, you could say. And that's why Christine Lagarde hates it so much. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, because it's simply a decentralized option and cannot be controlled here. But I think before we dive even deeper into this, let's quickly listen to what Christine Lagarde said in the current session. She gave a speech and then lowered the interest rates. And 25 basis points money printing BRRR. Then someone asks her, hey, what's the deal with all this digitization? And blah, blah, blah about it. And then she talked about, yes, stable coins and also cryptocurrencies. But let's listen in for a moment.
On the issue of stable coins, you know that we have regulation in place. It's called MiCAR. It is effective. It's currently under review and consultation for possible improvements. And I'm delighted that this is the case because we are facing a constant evolution of those digital payments, of those cross-border payments, of those stable coins, which I would put in a very separate category from the crypto assets, or however you want to call them.
Said, hey, yes, there is an evolution of payment methods, cross-border payments, and so on. There is also the MiCA regulation, which simply regulates stablecoins, which is very, very annoying for many Bitcoin and crypto users. With Satoshi tests and who knows what else is coming our way. By now, it's sometimes not fun anymore to buy Bitcoin on an exchange, but rather a hassle. But yeah, that's just how it is now. And then she makes the crucial statement and says, yes, there are stablecoins, but there's a significant difference here compared to cryptos. And by cryptos, she means Bitcoin, she means other things. And the fundamental difference here is that stablecoins are backed by central bank money. So it's basically just a digital representation of a euro or a dollar. Bitcoin is just a completely decentralized technology. And that's also the reason why she distinguishes them so strongly, because, it's justified to keep them separate. But she simply focuses here on stablecoins rather than cryptocurrency. She doesn't really go into that because she says, yes, there is evolution, new payment methods, and so on and so forth. And now would have been the point where there would have been room to say, hey, there are stablecoins, but there are also decentralized alternatives. If you want to be independent from the central bank, if you want to be self-sovereign, if you want to keep your Bitcoin in cold storage, then you need Bitcoin. Then you get yourself a TREZOR hardware wallet. I'll put a link below. You can easily keep your Bitcoin self-sovereign on your own hardware wallet. With the Cold Bitcoin Hotel, there is even up to 10% discount on such a hardware wallet. Here you can be completely self-sovereign. You don't have to trust any central bank or anything like that. But that just didn't happen right now. Here, the focus is simply on stablecoins, and that's what's relevant here. But let's listen further to what she has to say.
So the stablecoins are a different animal. And clearly having a good, solid regulation that constitutes the framework within which they can operate, I think is paramount and has been understood by the European Union, by the commissions, by various authorities in charge of those matters, and will be reviewed in order to make sure that it procures a safe harbor for those initiatives. But let me take the opportunity of this to acknowledge that for the first time in our monetary policy statement, we refer to the digital euro. And that should be a clear signal that not only do we stand ready and do the hard work that is incumbent upon us, but it also acknowledges the fact that other European authorities are hopefully going to accelerate the pace at which we can deliver.
Again, clear that they want to fully push forward with the digital euro, that they want to invest a lot of effort and so on, to offer it to people here in a timely manner. I've already said what I think about it. I don't think much of it, but we still need to look at two aspects that have been somewhat overlooked here, where there is actually not much information available yet. Specifically, the competitiveness compass and the savings and investment union are mentioned here. So, with the competitiveness compass, it's still very, very vague what is meant by that. But it's probably also meant as a tool for expanding power, including with the savings and investment union. This also implies that more power is being transferred from the regional level to the EU, that decisions are made less on a regional level and more on the EU level. And that's what we've been seeing all along, the trend that more and more power is being transferred from individual, sovereign countries to the EU. And there was also that viral tweet from Ursula von der Leyen about mobilizing citizen savings. And that was all in combination here. Also meant with the savings and investment union, as it says here below, you can see it again, this is the core of the planned savings and investment union. Yes, there were various interpretations. Some also thought that maybe it wasn't meant to be so drastic by Ursula von der Leyen. We don't know exactly, we still know relatively little about it. We definitely know that the ECB apparently doesn't feel like focusing only on price stability anymore. I mean, yes, if we look at it, they have almost never managed to do it. In the last 5 or 10 years, somehow. To maintain price stability here, to keep the inflation target, now it might not look so bad. These are also just temporary stories if the interest rates are lowered again. Sooner or later, inflation will escalate again. Then there will be another QE or whatever. Price stability will be out of control again, and new issues will arise. So, I find this a dramatic development, but feel free to write me comments on how you see it, if you still want to buy Bitcoin and put an end to this whole mess. Then I'll put a link below for you to 21 Bitcoin, where you can buy Bitcoin easily, safely, and simply. With the code Bitcoin, you can get up to 20% off fees when buying Bitcoin. Guys, see you. Peace out.